Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is Amna from the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication. We're back with the course Introduction to Journalism, bearing the code GMC 101. It's our 19th lecture, and the topic today is group communication. As humans, we are social beings. We naturally form relationships with others. In fact, relationships are often noted as one of the most important aspects of a person's life, and they exist in many forms. Interpersonal communication occurs between two people, but group communication, it may involve three or more people. Groups are a primary context for interaction within the business community as well as in other organizations and institutions. Groups may have heroes, enemies, alongside new members. Groups overlap and may share common goals, but they may also engage in conflict. Groups can be supportive or coercive and can exert powerful influences over individuals. Within a group, individuals may behave in distinct ways, use unique or specialized terms, or display symbols that have meanings to that group. Those same terms or symbols may be confusing, meaningless, or even unacceptable to another group. An individual may belong to two or more groups, adapting his or her communication pattern to meet group normative expectations. Groups are increasingly important across social media venues, and there are many examples of successful ventures on the web that value and promote group interaction, be those from any field. Groups have existed throughout human history and continue to follow familiar patterns across emerging avenues as we adapt to technology, computer-mediated interaction, suburban sprawl, and modern life. We need groups, and groups need us. Our relationship with groups warrants attention on this interdependence as we come to know our communities, our world, and ourselves. So the lecture today focuses on group communication. We'll start off with understanding it. As human beings, we just discussed, we tend to be in social circles around the people. We form relationships with one another naturally, and are one of the essential elements of our life. They exist in several forms in our lives. When communication occurs between two persons, it is called interpersonal communication. We have already discussed this earlier as well. On the other hand, when three or more individuals are involved, it is called group communication, which we have already discussed, but now we'll understand more about it. Groups such as families, work teams, friendship circles, committees, sports teams, anything. These are some of the examples. Groups may overlap and share common goals and objectives. For example, an individual may belong to one or many groups. For example, you consider yourself. You are a group member as a family. You are a group member as class fellows. You are a group member as your friend circle, and so on. There may be other interests where you may be group member. So groups also define the quality of life of a person in many essential ways. The groups that you belong to, they actually define your quality of life, because your existence in that group, how well you are settled there, it makes a big difference. A group may strongly influence an individual. Also, the actions taken by groups define many of the decisions shaping the world. Yes, all the decisions around the world, if you just dissect those are based on group communication, or those are based on the decisions taken by certain groups. Let's suppose, how do we get laws in Pakistan and ordinances? There is a group responsible for it. Where, for example, when we discuss about media, it's a group. When we discuss judiciary, it's a group. When we discuss legislature, it's a group. So these are different important, very, very important groups. So for example, if it were, let's suppose the decision of your admission, Once again, your family as a group was responsible for it. Maybe it was an overlap. For example, your friend circle was also responsible for it, dependent on whom did you seek advice and guidance from, and once again, who was more responsible for taking the decision. Was it you? Was it your parents, or like that? So people are influenced by groups such that they experience and understand the world. Your understanding of the world around you is quite very much owing to the groups you are part of. Following groups and how they function to influence society and individuals can be done through the study of groups. The group members can behave in different ways in a group. They may also use special terms or symbols understandable to the group but may be meaningless or confusing for some other groups. A person may belong to one or more groups and adapt his communication patterns according to norms. Groups use terms to distinguish themselves from other groups and identify the people involved. Groups tend to form similar patterns of behavior and have existed since historic times. Being part of the group, obviously you know what are the normative expectations are, and you tend to follow those patterns, behaviors, those patterns, those communications. We know they are our needs and we are theirs. Humans have shown this interdependence as they emerge to form communities, societies, and the whole world even. So the group is defined by the number of people sharing common goals, which distinguish them from other groups based on behavioral patterns and interpersonal relationships. A group can be similar to a crowd in a sense that both a crowd and a group focus or gather to look at a particular interest. But a group may be dissimilar to a crowd in the sense that it is more than just a collection of people that makes a group. There are common goals to accomplish. Unlike crowds, groups do not disperse once the piece of interest gets finished. Then a group can be similar to an organization in the sense that both have a particular set of rules that lead to the accomplishment of common goals. But unlike organizations, there is no bureaucracy in organizing members. Members of a group usually know each other, and they have developed informal rules kind of thing. I guess a group is similar to interpersonal pairing of two persons in a sense that group members interact and are influenced by each other on a personal level. But a group is dissimilar to an interpersonal relationship in a mind that three or more people in a group may have typical relationship or goals which may be missing from an ideal interpersonal relationship of three or more people. So now, after going through different theories of groups, I guess you're ready for understanding what group communication is. So let's move towards that then. Well, we form self-entities through our communication with others, and much of that interaction occurs in the context of a group. Thus, a group may be defined as three or more individuals who affiliate, interact, or cooperate in a familial, social, or work context. So, if it is three or more people who interact, cooperate, or affiliate in the context of their profession or their work, in the context of social gatherings or society, or in the context of their families, this is what we may call a group. So group communication may be defined as the exchange of information with those who are alike culturally, linguistically, or geographically. Group members may be known by their symbols such as patches and insignia on a military uniform. They may be known by their use of specialized language or jargon. For example, someone in IT information technology may use the term server in reference to the internet, whereas someone in the food service industry, in the cuisine setup, may use server to refer to the worker who takes customer orders in a restaurant. See the difference? Group members may also be known by their proximity, as in gated communities, regardless of how the group defines itself and regardless of the extent to which its borders are porous or permeable. A group recognizes itself as a group. Humans naturally make groups a part of their context or environment. So it is natural to us to stay in groups. So since it is so very natural, we need to understand how to communicate in groups. What is the importance of communication in groups? How can we work it well? Because, for example, I have already given you assignments, group assignments, where you had to communicate in groups, and you did face you had to face some of the positives as well as the negatives of group. But maybe just improving your group communication skills can make a big difference. So this is why this is very important for you. Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Yes, once again, this is very much true, that small group of people who are committed to change the world, they can make it happen. So it is all about how committed they are, how thoughtful they are, and their strength is their group communication. So while running a business or an organization, there can be different groups based upon their inclinations, their job profiles, responsibilities, their hierarchy, etc. With the right use of group communication, an organization can channelize its resources towards accomplishing goals in a more organized and result-driven manner. Group communication is the base of teamwork that ultimately enables any organization to function. So when you plan to ensure better teamwork in an organization, you need to channelize group communication adeptly. So similarly, if you need to work better and you are already in a group as a family, as class fellows, so you need to work towards your group communication skills. The polished those are, the better it is. Now, since we have understood communication earlier as well, we'll just move towards what includes group communication. Obviously, the communication can be both verbal as well as non-verbal. Both, since you have an understanding, we have already studied verbal and non-verbal communication, so I'm not going into much of the details. Both the ways of communicating are equally important because it is through this communication that group members can participate in determining goals, making decisions, and solving problems. First, let's have a look at verbal communication. See, words are the lifeblood of group interaction. Even when we communicate non-verbally, we translate those behaviors into words, which is like thoughts and impressions, as we construct meaning for the behaviors. Verbal communication, or what we say, can hold a group together or drive a wedge among members, hindering the accomplishment of goals. Because our words are abstract and can act as symbols for different referents, meanings are not centrally located within words themselves. Rather, meanings is derived by the communicators, both the sender as well as the receiver, based on the communication context, previous experiences with the words, previous experiences with the other person, and even previous experiences with the task. So meaning is perceptually based on, and so is not predictable. Thus, to be most effective, group members need to use concrete rather than abstract words, and to recognize that groups are capable of creating unique meanings for words and phrases. Verbal communication also helps structure the group. with the feedback, creating patterns of symmetrical or competitive messages that contribute to each group's uniqueness. Remember that although it is important to actively participate in a group, consuming too much of a group's time will adversely affect others' perception of you. Likewise, how you communicate is as important as what you communicate. So apart from what you are saying, obviously we've discussed that, it is also important how you are saying that, which takes us towards nonverbal communication. See, meaning can also be derived from how words are said or how behaviors are used to replace or substitute for verbal messages. This is known as nonverbal communication, but as we all know, nonverbal communication occurs in many forms through the tone and sound of your voice, your facial expressions, and other body gestures, and your use of space, touch, time, and objects. And we've had a thorough discussion of these things earlier as well. Even when you are not talking in a group, you are communicating non-verbally. Sometimes you do so purposely. For example, looking at your watch and tapping at it to draw attention to the few minutes the group has left. You have done this with me many times when you kind of pinpointed to the wall clock in the classroom. Other times you are unaware of the non-verbal signals you are sending. For example, continuously lacing and unlacing your fingers or closing your eyes when your least favorite person is mentioned. Even when you do not mean to, you are sending powerful signals that others will interpret. Thus, non-verbal communication is also very important in group settings. Your use of vocalics, kinesics, proxemics, haptics, chronamics, and artifacts creates messages and meanings for other group members. Non-verbal communication fulfills functions within groups that are sometimes difficult to communicate verbally. But interpreting non-verbal messages requires a great deal of skill because multiple meanings abound in these messages. So once again, you have to be very careful not only with your verbals but also with your non-verbals. Remember that verbal and non-verbal communication are intertwined. How you interpret messages from others depends on both the verbal and non-verbal components. But when verbal and non-verbal messages are inconsistent, receivers tend to rely on the non-verbal message. We've discussed this quite often, that this happens, for example, when some unpleasant person comes to your house. Obviously, you do not tell them not to come, rather you welcome them, but your body language is not that supportive. So similarly, so many times things happen when we're dealing in groups. So if there is inconsistency between verbal and non-verbal communication across other contexts as well, but we are talking about groups. So if there is inconsistency, people tend to rely more on non-verbal communication and they tend to interpret it depending on their own personal experiences and past perspectives and stuff like that. Having said that, let's move towards another important element in group communication. Since we have already discussed verbal and non-verbal, what could be the next thing? Well, it is something very important, but which is usually not given due importance. Yes, listening. When we think about how we communicate in groups, we often forget that in addition to verbal and non-verbal messages, listening is a major part of the communication process. Because we focus so much energy on what we say and how we say it, we often overlook our own listening skills. In the group context, listening is important because we spend far more time listening than talking. In fact, there was a research about personal managers, and they were asked to rate group communication skills. And what they identified effective listening is the most important skill for group communication. See, that is very, very important. Listening is actually another type of critical communication in group settings because groups always have more receivers or listeners than senders. Listening pitfalls are prevalent in groups, and all group members are occasionally guilty of poor listening. Competent listeners are group members who really hear what others say, work to understand the sender, and can respond appropriately. See, listening is very much important not only in group settings but in our normal day to day lives. Effective listening is a skill that we need to learn and we need to apply. Let me share with you an example that talks about the importance of effective listening. Here we go.
In all aspects of our lives, we have worked or will work within groups. From our homes to the playgrounds and from classrooms to boardrooms. We will be a part of groups of individuals working together towards a common goal. Ideally, we would all want this experience to be a good one, where everyone gets along and works well together. Unfortunately, that is not always the case. Have you ever spoken to someone and were not sure if they understood you? They seem to just nod, but something tells you they may have missed the point. You were willing to explain further, but since you don't want to come across as condescending, we're just waiting to be asked. Or have you ever been in a situation at home, school, or work, where someone or several people were speaking to you, but unfortunately your mind was somewhere else and you were not really paying a whole lot of attention? These situations may be familiar to all of you. The common thread across those scenarios was that someone was not actively listening. Active listening is a key ingredient in effective group communication. This lesson will explore what active listening is, the importance of active listening, and the 5 steps of active listening, as well as common mistakes made within that process. Let's start by defining what exactly it is we mean when we say active listening. Active listening is a multi-step process that allows a listener to repeatedly ask for clarification from the speaker to truly understand what was said. Let's see how that's done. Oh, hi Salma. Hi Ahmed. I submitted my draft last week, but there are a few incomplete sections that need more research data that I'm awaiting from my team. Also, I'd love for you to take a look at what I have and comment on the quality of my arguments and analysis. So let me understand if I understood you. You've submitted the draft, which some sections that are awaiting data from your research team. Also, you'd like me to review your work, particularly focusing on the quality of your arguments and analysis. Is that correct? Exactly. Your input will be very helpful. As you saw, Salma began the conversation with pausing what she was doing and turning her body to face Ahmed. Next, she listened carefully without interrupting until Ahmed completely finished speaking. The third step was to reiterate what she heard Ahmed say in her own words. Next, she asked Ahmed if she understood correctly. Sometimes, it may take more than one attempt at reiterating what was said before reaching full understanding. Repeat the process as many times as you need. So, what is the big deal about active listening? Well, active listening positions you to truly understand the information said by someone. It helps foster mutual respect and trust between individuals. This prevents confusion and frustration, as well as costly misunderstandings. For example, at work, at school, or maybe even at home. Now let's quickly review some of the common mistakes made by people attempting active listening. Limiting requests for clarification to only one time. Or maybe letting personal reactions to statements said interrupt the listening process. Sometimes it's gathering thoughts in preparation for a response while the speaker is still speaking. In other cases, It's acting interested, but not really present. Instead, be sincere and truly seek out new information and learning from what is being said.
See, actively listening and focusing on listening makes a big difference in your day-to-day communication, in your day-to-day interactions when dealing with other people, be those in interpersonal setups or in group communications. Since in group communications, you are not that much directly involved, and you do have the option to doze off or just fake listening. So there are many times people do this thing, and then the end result is the group actually fails to do the kind of work they can do had they been listening appropriately and actively. So this is very, very much important to focus on listening, and you can work towards improving your listening skills. Going on from that, let's discuss why is it important to have a quality of group communication. See, quality of communication between members of a group is also an essential factor in making decisions and achieving goals. It has been seen that with the growing number of members in the group, the effectiveness of communication keeps on decreasing because then their interaction is not that much close. For quality group communication, the group members must possess a sense of belonging and mutual respect to each other, along with common goals. The importance of effective group communication increases in different environments, especially businesses. For that matter, there are many variables that are at play. For example, let's have a look at the seating arrangement. In a circular seating arrangement, members can make eye contact and communicate with everyone else in the group. Hence, a web network style is followed in communication where everyone can share ideas. It has been observed that this type of arrangement is most effective in idea generation, decision making, and problem solving. Then what else matters? Types of messages. Yes, the types of messages a group exchanges determines the kind of the group. It can be a social group or a task group depending upon the nature of messages being exchanged by them. See, we have our different groups of students. For example, the Facebook group of students. So it is more towards the accomplishment of students or the opportunities coming in. So it is that kind of a group. The quality of messages, it also determines the roles played by each member of the group. There are certain groups where you can have a chit chat and then you can kind of tease each other or taunt a bit, but with those groups where you have faculty members with you, obviously you cannot do these things. So the roles change, the kind of communication, the kind of messages that you can put in a group, that you can share in a group, that makes a lot of difference. Group communication can consist of various types and means, such as social media, or it can be print media, digital media, it can be speeches, etc. This choice actually depends on numerous factors like the availability of communication mode, the target audience, the cost of the communication initiative, etc., etc. Then there are group norms. Yes, group norms are actually standards, customs, and behavioral expectations. These emerge from the members as a group forms. These are self and group imposed expectations. As I just gave you the example of your, for example, social media pages of JMC group, where when you have your teachers there, you are quite particular the kind of language you use, the kind of things you can post onto that group, the kind of comments that you can make. So it is more about the positive aspects of JMC, the opportunities coming in, the work of the alumni. So there are certain norms that what kind of behavior is expected of you when you are in that group. And that is dependent on different groups. It changes from group to group. You might be part of another group, for example, where you are just your class fellows, and there you can kind of discuss other things as well, and you can just share, for example, jokes as well. But when you are in a group with your teachers, you cannot share jokes. So see, things change. There are certain rules, there are certain norms for communication within a group, and you actually have to abide by that. So having said that, I'll just revamp on the importance of groups. Actually, synergy exists when the performance of a group goes beyond the capabilities of an individual group members. When synergy occurs, individual group members feed off one another's energy and interest, like they benefit from it. And how does that occur? The synergy occur plainly effective and appropriate communication among group members. It promotes positive synergy. In essence, group members can accomplish a great deal because their communication about the task does not threaten their relationships. Thus, reciprocally strong relationships among group members allow the group to work effectively on the task. That's all for today. Thank you.